And welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 66. This is the Week 9 recap episode where the Cincinnati Bengals defeated the Las Vegas Raiders 41-24 to get their first home win of this 2024 season. If you're brand new to this show, you can go back and check out episode 0 where I explain more about who I am and why I'm making this show. But really, I've been a fan of the Bengals for most of my life. As soon as I really discovered what the Bengals were as a team, and I've been watching football for a long time, and I didn't do a preview for this game. Usually I do a preview episode, but there wasn't a whole lot to say about this game. The only thing that really needed to be said was said by Joe Burrow in the week leading up to this game. He said, this is a must-win game. They need this game for their season, for this year to stay relevant in the conversation. The Bengals really needed this win. So that's really the only preview we need for this episode. And there was a lot of anticipation about players. We'll do a little bit of a setup for what was going on, but there's a lot of things to cover in this episode. We're going to break it all down in this episode. Mostly good things. We're going to focus on all the positives to be excited about because there's lots of stuff to be excited about to celebrate from this big win. There won't be a lot of time to celebrate, so we got to take this day, celebrate this victory for what it is. It's a big win in the NFL, and they're hard to come by. Got to appreciate those. It's going to be a short week because the Bengals have another game coming up this Thursday night. Quick turnaround, but for right now, let's just focus on this win against the Raiders. As I said, in this game, 41-24 win by the Bengals. Biggest margin of victory, I should say, biggest, most number of points that the Bengals have scored this season. Over 40 points for the first time. Great performance by Joe Burrow, especially in this game. 5 touchdown passes for Joe Burrow, tying his career high for touchdown passes in the game, in an NFL game. And also we had a big performance defensively out of Trey Hendrickson. 4 sacks from Trey Hendrickson. I think he had at least one forced fumble in the game. He was all around the Raiders quarterbacks because they had to make a switch mid-game when the first quarterback wasn't being very effective for a lot of reasons. But Trey Hendrickson, 4 sacks. I think that was his career high. So both players, star players for offense and defense for the Bengals, had a huge impact in this game. That was great to see. And this really keeps the Bengals' playoff hopes alive. I think what we learned in the previous game against the Eagles is the Bengals aren't going to be maybe one of the top-tier elite teams, but when they've come up against lesser opponents like the Panthers or the Giants or the Raiders, they've been able to take care of business. So they're not at the bottom tier of teams either. They're kind of in that middle tier. They're comfortably in the middle. And the thing that sets them apart from a lot of teams is they've got Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow, for the most part, really played at an elite level in this game. He looked like, if you could put him up there with any of the top quarterbacks in the NFL at any point in their career. Like Patrick Mahomes, you take Patrick Mahomes at the very peak of his game, and you could put that right next to this Joe Burrow game yesterday, and I would say Joe Burrow would be just as good as, whoever you want to call it, like Tom Brady, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, any quarterback out there, I don't care who it is, pick their best game and put that against Joe Burrow's tape from yesterday, and Joe Burrow was just as good. I mean, the only thing you could say about Joe Burrow that he had a couple missed opportunities, a couple of passes that he wanted to take back. Maybe not necessarily the decisions, but he could have made a better throw on a couple of them. He's not going to hit every pass perfectly. We know that. He's not, a robot jugs machine out there. But not a lot of yards. Joe Burrow was 27 of 39, 251 yards, 6.4 yards per attempt. 1 interception, we'll get to that, but only 1 sack, and QBR out of 100 of 85.5, passer rating of 115.5. Great day, but not a lot of yards. Only 250 yards, basically on almost 40 passes. So a lot of short passing, but very effective. And Joe Burrow started off the game 15 for 15 passing. He didn't have an incomplete pass until his 16th pass of the game. So it was not deep passing, but it was short, medium, underneath, effective passing, keeping the Bengals offense moving. And they had a couple of long drives to start out the game offensively. Again, they had a 14-play drive and a 13-play drive, scoring drive, to start this game. Bengals offense getting off to a good start. So that was good to see. But let's go back, and before we get into that, let's kind of set up since I didn't do the preview, what were the big storylines heading into this game? The biggest storyline heading into this game, like I said, Joe Burrow said it's must win. Everybody needed to lock in, but it wasn't looking good. We weren't getting a lot of good news on the injury front. But I should say, expectations-wise, the Bengals were 7-point favorites going into this game. So Bengals were favored by 7 points. They ended up winning by 17 points. So they covered the spread if you're into betting. So they exceeded the expectations in that regard. So big win. We got that, they said check the box, get that one knocked out of the way. But T. Higgins did not play in this game. This was the 4th missed game of the season for T. Higgins. He was out last week also, and the first 3 games of the season that the Bengals played without T. Higgins were all losses. For various reasons, you can't say necessarily that missing T. Higgins was the primary reason why the Bengals lost, but not having T on the field is obviously a disadvantage for the Bengals offense. They were also going to be without their starting left tackle, Orlando Brown Jr. This is only the 2nd game of Orlando Brown Jr.'s career that he has had to miss because of injury. He's usually been very durable. We'll have to continue to keep an eye on both of those players going forward for the rest of the season. Hopefully, they'll be able to make a comeback at some point. But neither one of those players practiced at all this previous week, and so it wasn't a surprise that they weren't able to play. But that's something to keep an eye on. Certainly won't be helpful to lose 2 of their best players. We also saw, surprisingly, Zach Moss, their starting running back, did not practice on Friday. He practiced Wednesday and Thursday, but then he did not practice Friday because of a neck injury. I think earlier in the season he had been listed on the injury report with some kind of a neck injury, maybe week 1 or 2, and now this popped up. I'm not sure if it was something that happened during practice or if it was just something that flared up on him or what, but there's rumors going around that he may have to miss a significant amount of weeks, multiple games. He may have to go on injured reserve. That means the Bengals had to call up one of the other running backs from their practice squad to the active roster. I think it's Kendrick Milton is the guy's name. I don't think he got any snaps in the game this Sunday. Bengals may be looking, the trade deadline is this Tuesday, tomorrow. So if the Bengals are going to get any kind of a running back in a trade, they'll have to do it in the next 24 hours if Zach Moss is going to be missing, and if they need to find some kind of replacement for Zach Moss if they want to for the rest of the season. We'll have to see how that plays out. So that meant Chase Brown, 2nd-year running back out of Illinois, number 30 for the Bengals. He was going to be the primary running back. He'd been kind of splitting the duties with Zach Moss at running back this season. And as the season had gone on, Chase Brown was the more effective runner for sure over Zach Moss. There were questions about his pass blocking abilities because he's not a very big guy, Chase Brown. Zach Moss isn't huge either, but he's a little bit bigger, older, maybe stronger in theory than Chase Brown. But Zach Moss out, Chase Brown had to step up, and Chase Brown did step up in this game. This was his first 100-yard rushing game for Chase Brown. 27 carries, 120 yards, 4.4 yards per carry. No touchdown runs for Chase Brown. He did have a touchdown catch in this game. He had 5 catches for 37 yards and 1 touchdown. That's a 7.4 yards per catch average on 5 out of 5 targets. Chase Brown, long of 21 yards. He had a couple long runs of, I think, like 17 and 21 or somewhere in that range. But good, let's see, that's over 150 all-purpose combined yards for Chase Brown. So good performance out of him. That was good to see. I don't know if Chase Brown is going to be able to hold up physically the pounding, touching the ball over 30 times in the game, getting tackled a bunch by a lot of much bigger guys. There was one moment in the game where Chase Brown got tackled by Max Crosby. He took kind of a hard hit, and he came out of the game for a couple plays he was holding his shoulder. He might have had like a rib or an arm injury. I don't know what happened. He was able to stay in the game, but plays like that where hopefully he's able to stay up and withstand the physical beating of the rest of this season if he's going to be the primary running back for the Bengals. But with those players being out for the Bengals offense, one of the big players that they were supposedly going to be counting on is rookie wide receiver Jermaine Burton, number 81. So if I had done a preview episode, I probably would have talked about how this is going to be a big opportunity for Jermaine Burton to step up and fill in that role for T. Higgins on the offense. And the reporters, this was the first time that we had seen Jermaine Burton do any interviews in the locker room during the week. And they were asking him, what was he expecting from himself, and was he excited for the opportunity now that T was going to be out and team was going to depend on him more in the game. Was he excited? And he was saying things like, I've been waiting for my opportunity. And they asked him, basically, like Kelsey Conway asked him, do you have any regrets about anything that happened earlier this season, why you haven't been playing? And he's like, no, I don't have any regrets. Like, I can't put myself in the game, and I feel like if they had played me before, I could have been making plays this whole time. So he's, was very confident in himself and his abilities. Then out of nowhere, Sunday morning, Jermaine Burton, surprise inactive. No, he wasn't injured. There was nothing over the weekend that came out about Jermaine Burton. All of a sudden, right before the game, they announced him inactive. And then on the game, you could see him on the sidelines. He's standing on the sidelines in warm-up gear. Doesn't seem sick or anything. He's it doesn't look like he got into a fight or anything. He looks fine. He's laughing, joking, seems in good spirits. So they said on the broadcast to begin, it was a coach's decision about why he wasn't playing, not an injury, coach's decision. So that was really confusing why this guy and Joe Burrow in the press conference had even given him a stamp of approval, had good words to say about how Jermaine Burton had been making progress throughout the season. Jamar Chase was talking. Everybody was talking about Jermaine Burton, and he was finally going to get his opportunity. All the players, everybody, all the reporters. So the reporters were probably mad that they spent all this time writing all their stories and recording all their podcasts and doing all these shows about how Jermaine Burton is going to get this big opportunity. Now all of a sudden he's inactive. We'll have to monitor that situation for the rest of this season, but it sounds like Jermaine Burton just didn't show up on Saturday for the team meeting and walkthrough that they had planned without any notice, didn't call. So I know he's a young guy, he's in his early 20s, immature, all that stuff, but I think most people at that point in their life understand if you've got a job and you're expected to be at the job, you need to be there. And if you're not going to be there, you need to let somebody know why you're not going to be there. You can't just not show up for the job and then expect it to be all cool. So NFL or really at any occupation, doesn't matter. So if you're listening to this, kids, let it be a lesson to you. If you have a job, go to the job. Do not show up for the job. So, they asked Zach Taylor after the game. I know I'm getting ahead of myself. They asked Zach Taylor about this after the game. Obviously, everybody was like, what the F? Why is this guy not playing in the game? And Zach Taylor said, what did he say? I don't even remember because immediately everything Zach Taylor says in one ear, out the other. I think he said something like, well, Jermaine's best days are ahead of him and we're going to help him get there. And today, I just have dispensed with the Zach Taylor accent because I can't do it anymore. So he said, Jermaine Burton's best days are ahead of him, and we're going to help him get there. This was a necessary step that we had to take in helping him. So apparently, him not playing in the game was the necessary step to help him understand what it takes to be a pro and all that stuff. So that's a little bit worrisome, but it's only one guy. Hopefully one bad apple doesn't infect the rest of the team, and you would hope the rest of the guys understand how to be professional, how to take care of their responsibilities. Hopefully this is just one knucklehead that's not going to cause any problems with the rest of the team. I don't know what's going on with his personal life. He's going to have to figure that out, but it's not a good look, especially if this is the one concern that everybody had about him was the maturity issues. What's up with this guy? Does he have some kind of personality problem? It's not looking good if you're not even able to show up. But let's not focus on the negatives. That's not the story of this game. The story of this game was big win. Mike Gesicki stepped up, looked like he's playing 5 years younger than ever before, making amazing catches, amazing plays. Mike Gesicki, 5 catches, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns on 6 targets with a long of 47 yards. Mike Gesicki was out there doing the gritty with Ja'Marr Chase. He was doing 2 double gritties, 2 gritties from Mike Gesicki. So instead of Jermaine Burton, who could have been out there making plays, we saw Mike Gesicki taking over that T. Higgins role in the offense again. And Mike Gesicki is running wide receiver routes at 6'6", and that gives Joe Burrow such a wide area to throw the ball. He has confidence. He almost had a 3rd touchdown, but Mike Gesicki came down with his foot out of bounds. But it was a great catch, strong hands catch by Mike Gesicki. That's one of the things that some of the other receivers for the Bengals weren't really able to do as much, is make those tough contested catches with somebody draped all over him. Gesicki has been able to do that. So he came up big for the Bengals offense. Ja'Marr Chase, as we would expect, was highly involved in the offense, but a relatively quiet day from Ja'Marr Chase. 7 catches on 11 targets, no touchdowns, and only 43 yards receiving. So still about 6 yards per catch, well under the average of what we would expect. There was one deep pass to Ja'Marr Chase it was a perfect pass from Joe Burrow, dropped it right in the bucket, but just went straight through Ja'Marr Chase's hands. Uncharacteristically, a drop for Ja'Marr. But otherwise, mostly a good performance catching the ball from the Bengals receivers. We saw Drew Sample get involved, 4 for 4 catches, only 14 yards, but he did have a touchdown on a scramble drill. Joe Burrow was so effective when the Bengals got down into the red zone at just avoiding the rush from the Raiders, especially Max Crosby. Joe Burrow did a great job of using Max Crosby's aggressiveness against him, and Joe Burrow was navigating the pocket like the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Like I said, Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, any of the best quarterbacks in the league. I put Joe Burrow's scrambling and evasiveness right there with any of those guys this year. And that's one of the things we didn't see last year because of Joe Burrow's calf injury, that nagging calf injury that was with him all year. Even when he was, somewhat healthy, he still wasn't moving like prime Joe Burrow. And he had worked on that all off season. We didn't see it in that first game against the Patriots where they lost, but this was Joe Burrow at the peak of his powers, moving around, avoiding the sack for the most part when he could, and making plays on the run. That's the thing. He did run and pick up a couple first downs with his legs, but this was Joe Burrow running to make plays with his arms, finding receivers who were open down the field, not necessarily launching, deep lasers all the way down the field for 50-yard bomb touchdowns, but running around and just finding a guy open 5 yards right in front of him to get the first down. Quick, accurate, on-time, catchable pass to the guy who's open. It sounds easy to do, but to be able to do that on such a consistent basis really gives the Bengals a lot of confidence in themselves that they can score a lot of points against whatever defense you put out there. The Raiders obviously were not a good offensive team, but the Raiders at least had, on paper, a respectable defense, but they weren't able to shut the Bengals offense down, giving up 41 points. Part of that was because the Raiders offense was so ineffective, and then they just started giving the ball away, literally gave the ball away to the Bengals on one play. They just fumbled the handoff, gave it right back to the Bengals defense. So the Raiders offense didn't really help themselves, but good job by the Bengals offensively, clicking on all cylinders for the most part there. In defense, they did give up a few plays here and there, but in the middle part of the game, they did a good job of shutting them down, forcing turnovers. One of the biggest stories in this game was the injuries that the Raiders suffered. Raiders, like halfway through the game, had already had 3 of their offensive linemen get injured, and most teams only dress 8 offensive linemen total. So I think the Raiders were down to their last backup offensive lineman, even on the roster. If anybody else got hurt, they're going to have to start putting in like defensive linemen to play on offense. So that was a huge disadvantage in that part of the game. And the Raiders offensively, they just traded away their best player in Devontae Adams to the Jets. They lost Josh Jacobs, their best running back, in the offseason. Their quarterback had been benched. Gardner Minshew got benched for Aiden O'Connell. But then Aiden O'Connell either sprained or broke his thumb on his throwing hand, so they had to put Gardner Minshew back in at quarterback. He did not look very good in this game. I don't know if he was injured or not, but he was moving very stiffly. Like it looked like if you're old like me and you sleep wrong and you kind of pull your neck or sprain your neck and then you can't really walk right and you're kind of like real stiff. That's what Gardner Minshew looked like. He looked like he slept on his neck wrong and he had a really stiff neck and he couldn't really move or walk or turn his head too quick in one direction or the other. So he looked like about a 75-year-old man playing quarterback out there. Eventually, the Bengals forced Gardner Minshew out of the game, and they put Cincinnati Bearcat alum Desmond Ridder in at quarterback for the Raiders. He didn't have a ton more success than Gardner Minshew. He got sacked by Trey Hendrickson a bunch of times, fumbled the ball away, but he did have a late touchdown in this game to the star rookie tight end for the Raiders, Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers was mostly held under control by this Bengals defense in this game. So that was a positive, was Brock Bowers only had 5 catches for 45 yards and that 1 touchdown late in the game when it was already well out of reach. Otherwise, Bengals defense did a good job of shutting him down. Raiders didn't do much offensively, especially running the game. Raiders have not been able to. The Raiders were the only team in the NFL who had a worse running game than the Bengals. So it wasn't a surprise that the Bengals outran the Raiders, but did so 2-1. Bengals had 130 rushing yards. Raiders only had 60 rushing yards in the entire game. And for the Bengals, 120 of those 130 yards came from Chase Brown. Joe Burrow added 11 rushing yards himself. Most of it came on 1 running play where he picked up 11 yards. Did a great job of outrunning Max Crosby. Max Crosby, he plays an interesting style of defense. He plays differently than most other players in the NFL because he's, physically a freak. So he's like 6'5", 280 pounds, but can also run extremely fast and he's quick. But he doesn't always do necessarily what you would think he would do or what a defensive player is supposed to do. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes he puts himself in bad situations or takes himself out of the play by doing the crazy stuff. Sometimes the crazy stuff works for Max Crosby and the Raiders really well. But he did get some hits on Joe Burrow. Max Crosby did some. There was one play where Max Crosby jumped the snap and came off sides, but the referees didn't blow the whistle until late, really late. And Max Crosby just had an unabated run at Joe Burrow, untouched, nailed Joe Burrow in the helmet with his head. And Joe Burrow was seen on the sidelines getting some help from the medical staff because he was bleeding from behind the ear. Joe Burrow had a little bit of blood on the back of his neck and the head. So luckily he didn't get a concussion, it didn't look like. But that was a scary play. And then there was another play where Joe Burrow was trying to throw it away, maybe on a screen pass, took another hit and got knocked over by Max Crosby. The only concerning thing was on both those times where Joe Burrow was getting knocked around by Max Crosby, none of Joe Burrow's offensive line teammates are coming to his defense, getting up in Max Crosby's face, saying, hey, you can't, touch my quarterback like that. You can't knock around my teammate like that. They always coach him up, say, hey, if you see your teammate, your quarterback, getting beat up by one of the defense, you got to go in there and protect him. But we didn't see Bengals offensive linemen protecting Joe Burrow at all. I didn't see Cordell Volson, Cody Ford, Ted Karras, Amarius Mims was just kind of standing there watching Max Crosby, the guy over him, go in and blow up Joe Burrow, and then he doesn't even help Joe Burrow up off the ground or anything. Come on, guys, our franchise quarterback's getting annihilated over here, and we gotta stand up for him a little bit. But I'm sure the Bengals coaches will address that. For the most part, the Bengals did a pretty good job coaching decision-wise in this game. There are a couple of questionable play calls we might get to in more detail later, especially offensively. They tried to throw a pass to Amarius Mims, their right tackle. That did not work at all. But I don't know. I guess a positive aspect I guess I'm staying on the positive right now. Since this game was on Fox, it was available on my local TV station. So I don't know about you, but I live in an area where it's Cleveland Browns territory. And if there's a competition between the two games of if it's going to be a Browns game or a Bengals game, usually on CBS, they always play the Browns game instead of the Bengals game, which it drives me insane. So luckily in this week, it was Browns on CBS, Bengals on Fox, which is traditionally not how it's been. Traditionally, AFC teams have played on CBS, or in the last couple decades, I should say. But recently, they've changed it up so that Fox and CBS can have games from either conference. So now, Raiders and Bengals are two AFC teams, and they're playing on Fox, which is something you would have never seen for the last 20 years. But now, all of a sudden, we got Fox. So that means that now we're seeing more games on Fox with Daryl Moose Johnston as the color analyst. And since he hasn't called a lot of Bengals games, I haven't gotten to appreciate him. But I do appreciate Daryl Johnston. He does a good job of calling the games, breaking down the plays, explaining what's going on, why decisions are being made, or what should be made, and why he thinks different things are, a mistake or whatever. So you can tell he watches the team's previous games to understand the history of the team, how they have performed in previous outings, and he just adds context to the game, which is a huge contrast to somebody like Tom Brady. Tom Brady, speaking of the Raiders, Tom Brady this season has become a minority owner of this Raiders team. So actually, Tom Brady, I think, owns 10% of the Las Vegas Raiders now. So because of that, there's a stipulation where since he's now a part owner of an NFL team and he's working for Fox as a broadcast analyst, Tom Brady's not allowed to go to any of these prep meetings, production meetings. He's not allowed to interview the players or the coaches because he could theoretically be getting inside information that could help his team that he owns. So it's a weird situation. It's weird that the league and Fox has allowed him to do this, but I guess Tom Brady is a cash cow, money maker for the league and the teams that they allow him to do this. But when Tom Brady is calling an NFL game, it's the complete opposite. He doesn't have any inside information. He hasn't talked to the players or coaches to add any additional context. It doesn't even seem like he watches the games that they've played in the season so far. So he doesn't say like, oh, this is what this team likes to do. Oh, I see, last week they did this and this. Like, he doesn't say any of that. He just looks or he sounds like a guy who just showed up and watches the game like you and me and just says whatever comes to his head while he's watching the game, which is exactly like anybody could do that. So, and he's not even good at it, is the thing. Like, he doesn't really necessarily say anything. Most of the time, it sounds like Tom Brady is just trying not to curse. He understands he's on television. He did say pissed at one point a couple games ago, which I don't think you can say on the air, but they just kind of rolled with it. But most of the time, it sounds like Tom Brady is just trying not to say the F word. He's like, okay, don't say the F word, and just say something like, oh, whoa. And that's pretty much all he ever says. But on to this game with the Raiders. My point was, Daryl Johnston, great job calling the game. I forget who, Kevin Kugler, I think was the other guy. He's fine, whatever. But defensively, we also saw Logan Wilson step up, had 9 tackles and 2 fumble recoveries. Great game from Logan Wilson up front. Didn't hear too much from Jermaine Pratt, but can't have all the linebackers making all the plays. Didn't hear too much from the defensive line outside of Chris Jenkins, rookie number 90. He had his first career NFL sack. So nothing flashy. It was just a good job of all the 4 Bengals defensive linemen collapsed the pocket onto Gardner Minshew until, I think it was Gardner Minshew still at that point. He just had nowhere to go, nowhere to escape. May have been Desmond Ridder, I can't remember. But whoever it was, they got sacked by Chris Jenkins. He just did a good job of being persistent, staying with the play, and pushing his guy upfield into the quarterback and finishing the sack. We also saw another touchdown catch from number 80, Andre Iosivas, second-year player out of Princeton. This was, I think, his first touchdown where he didn't catch it in the end zone. I could be wrong on that one, but I don't think he's had a catch and run into the end zone so far. He's mostly just been kind of Joe Burrow scramble drill. He'll be in the end zone and just get open and catch it while he's going out of bounds usually. This time, caught kind of a crossing route over the middle, and he only had like 6 yards to run into the end zone, but it did a good job of diving, extending the ball all the way, and just barely getting the ball over the goal line before he was touched down. So in that situation where you're close to the goal line, sometimes it's risky. Like we saw Tanner Hudson get the ball a little bit away from his body as he was going into the end zone in that Patriots game in week 1 and ended up getting stripped. Ball got fumbled and the other team recovered it. So it was lucky that nobody was able to around to strip the ball away from Andre Iosivas. He was able to complete that for the touchdown. Good play from Andre on that one. There are a couple plays that Andre could have made in this game that he wishes he could take back, certainly. But good to see a touchdown catch from Andre in this one. Kendrick Pryor, wide receiver who got called up from the Bengals practice squad because Jermaine Burton was inactive in this game. This was his first time having a catch in an NFL game. So first catch from Kendrick Pryor. He also returned a kick. So he was on special teams making plays. So while Jermaine Burton was passing up his opportunities and, making immature mistakes, kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, the Bengals were rewarding a guy who's done all the right things. Kendrick Pryor was on the Bengals last season. He made a bunch of plays in the preseason. I think it was either last season or 2 seasons ago. And then Zach Taylor's brother with the Jacksonville Jaguars kind of poached Kendrick Pryor off the Bengals roster at the last second. I don't think he ended up doing too much. Obviously, this is his first NFL catch, so he didn't do too much when he was with the Jaguars. Bengals got him back at some point in the offseason. And so now he's finally getting into the game. making the most of his opportunities while he's in there. So that's good for him to get rewarded, sticking with it and being persistent. We also saw a pretty good punting performance out of Ryan Rico. He almost had the perfect punt again. He's been so close on a couple of these. It was late in the game. Bengals were up by like 21 points or something, and they punted it, and Rico's punt landed inside the 5-yard line, bounced straight sideways to the right, and there was no Bengal who was close enough to be able to catch it and down it before it went into the end zone. But the ball bounced, and it was going out of bounds, and it went right over top of the end zone pylon at the, basically 0-yard line. If it had been, just 6 inches to the right, so it would have just gone a little bit to the right, it would have missed the pylon and gone out of bounds right at the inside of the half-yard line, pinning the Raiders basically as deep as you could possibly pin them. So close. And the Bengals actually challenged this. That's how you know the game was going well for the Bengals, was they were like, you know what? Screw it. Let's challenge the spot of this punt just for fun. They ended up losing the challenge, but, might as well go for that. Why not? Go for the challenge. I like it. They almost got it. It could have been the perfect punt for Ryan Rico. So validating the decision to go with Ryan Rico as the punter from here on out. I don't know. I don't think Brad Robbins has gotten picked up by any NFL teams. But speaking of former Bengals, Zach Carter was actually on the Raiders roster. I think he was active in this game, but I don't see him on the stat sheet as far as making any tackles. So he may not have been active in this game. But Zach Carter, former 3rd-round pick for the Bengals, who was released this season after, week 4 or something like that. They brought in Lawrence Guy. And speaking of which, I should mention, Lawrence Guy was also released by the Bengals. And they brought up a couple of players from the practice squad for this game. Also I think it was an offensive lineman. Can't remember the other guy they brought up. But that was good to see. And it's so funny because in the moment, Joe Burrow was not satisfied with his play, especially at the end of the game. So if you go back and you watch kind of like the last 4th quarter, it was kind of a surprise that Joe Burrow played as much as he did because the Bengals were ahead by 3 touchdowns. The Raiders weren't really moving the ball or doing anything. And it seemed like Joe Burrow should probably not play for the entire game. They might as well put the backup in, but Joe Burrow played almost the entire game. He did at one point throw a interception that got returned for a touchdown. I think it was like 31-10, and then Joe Burrow threw a pick 6 that the Raiders got back to 2 touchdowns, made it 31-17. On the interception, it was a good play by Jack Jones to read the play. He jumped the route, guessed that it was going to be a screen pass to Jamar Chase, who was going in motion. Not a good job by Andre Yosivach. This is where his assignment was block the guy in front of you, but he didn't even get a hand on him. Jack Jones just ran right around him, and Andre didn't even touch him. But also on this play, Joe Burrow didn't make a good throw. If you look at it in slow motion, it was this wobbling, slow duck, almost like end over end, not a spiral, not a lot of zip on the ball. So I don't know. Maybe it was one of those situations where Joe Burrow, with the wrist surgery, he's not able to make that kind of quick catch throw to his right side with a lot of zip on it. So that was a little bit concerning because it made it really easy for the defender to just jump in front of the pass and catch it because it was so slow moving and wobbly. We'll have to watch that. Bengals might want to, think about why did the Raiders know that pass was coming on that particular, did they do something to kind of telegraph or let it go? But the thing is, and it's not quite the same situation, but later in the game, the Raiders got greedy on another pass they thought was going to be a screen to Jamar Chase. So 2 players for the Raiders jumped up and tried to go for Jamar Chase. They left Mike Gesicki wide open all by himself in the middle of the field. Joe Burrow did a good job of seeing him, not panicking, throwing an accurate pass in stride, let Mike Gesicki catch, outran all the defenders, not get touched all the way to the end zone. It looked like a play you would see in high school or college, where a guy is just wide open by himself running down the field for a touchdown. You usually don't see that type of thing in the NFL, but that was the type of day it was for the Bengals in this game. They're throwing passes to Amarius Mims. They're challenging the spot of a punt. Bengals pretty much could do whatever they wanted in this day against the Raiders. Not a good performance by the Raiders, but like I said, the Raiders were struggling with a lot of injuries. Seemed like every other drive, the Raiders head coach was walking out on the field to check on some injured player for his team. So Bengals, for the most part, got lucky in that regard. However, there was some negative news. We did see rookie tight end Eric All Jr. go down with a non-contact knee injury to his right knee. He had a couple catches in this game. He had a good 18-yard catch with a catch in the seam over the middle, picked up a first down. But then I think it was on his second catch. He only played for like 15 plays or something in this game, but he caught the pass. But as soon as he planted his right leg, he immediately felt something wrong with it, went down. He got tackled, but he pretty much gave himself up immediately, and then he was not able to come off the field under his own power. He had to be helped off by the trainers, and they took him to the locker room immediately, and you could just kind of see in slow motion his knee just kind of buckled on him. This is the same knee that he injured last year. He had to have surgery on a torn ACL, and that is the same injury that they are fearing he has suffered. They're going to get an MRI on that knee today to confirm it, but it's looking like Eric All's season may be over. It was a promising start. He was really playing well, and you hate to see it for a guy like that who had put in a lot of work to come back, doing all the rehab to get back from that torn ACL so quickly, and to have the same injury again a year later. You really feel sorry for a guy like that, but hopefully he'll be able to come back and do the rehab and get back next season. We'll have to see if he's able to start next season, but to come back again from the same injury quickly, you never know. So unfortunate to see that from Eric All. We also did see number 92 on defense, BJ Hill, got injured with a rib injury. He was out for the rest of the game. We'll have to get more information, but he wasn't able to come back, so must be serious enough he wasn't able to continue for the rest of the game. So hopefully that's not something that's going to keep him out for multiple games, but we'll have to watch that. But overall, the Bengals did a good job of working around those injuries that they had. The guys who played instead of Eric All and BJ Hill, the other tight ends, the other defensive linemen, did a good job of filling in. So guys like Drew Sample, Tanner Hudson. Tanner Hudson had one catch, I think. He also had a drop. No, Tanner Hudson had two catches. He also had a drop where he could have picked up a first down. Good pass for Tanner Hudson from Joe Burrow, but wasn't able to complete the catch. But we're going to have to rely on guys like that. And maybe the other rookie who was inactive, again, he's been inactive every game, Tanner McLachlan, rookie out of Arizona. He was the other tight end that the Bengals drafted. And I think it was kind of because Eric All had those injuries in college. They weren't sure maybe if he was going to be ready to play, so they got another tight end. We're going to have to see if Tanner McLachlan has anything that they can give him. We haven't seen him, so we don't really know what he can do at all. He'll be getting more opportunities in practice, I'm sure, this week. So that'll be interesting to see. Kind of some small notes. There was a good play from Jordan Battle, number 27, safety, where he was guarding Brock Bowers down the field, had his back turned to the ball again, and this time it worked out for him, where he was able to react when Brock Bowers put his hands up to try to catch the pass. Jordan Battle swiped, didn't see the ball coming, but swiped in reaction, got the ball out as they went to the ground, didn't allow Brock Bowers to complete the catch. So good play from Jordan Battle on that one. There was a good pass breakup from Cam Taylor-Britt. They first play of the game. Raiders threw a deep pass on Cam Taylor-Britt to Trey Turner, and the receiver got behind Cam Taylor-Britt, but he did a good job of seeing the ball in the air and having the speed to recover, get back in position to swat the ball away before the receiver could make a catch on it. He was going up against Trey Tucker, I think is the guy's name. Trey Tucker, receiver for the Raiders. He is also a Cincinnati Bearcat. Not very big guy. He's only 5'8", 185 pounds. So they tried to throw it to Trey Tucker a few times, but didn't have much success. Only 2 catches for 5 yards on 6 targets for Trey Tucker. Jakobi Meyers was the only receiver outside of Brock Bowers who had much success for the Raiders receiving. He had 8 catches for 105 yards on 11 targets, long of 23. There were a few times where he got the best of the Bengals defensive backs, including one especially egregious play from Cam Taylor-Britt, where again, he got completely turned around at the line of scrimmage. Jakobi Meyers faked like he was going outside and then broke it back inside on the slant. Cam Taylor-Britt went out with the outside move, and then when Jakobi Meyers broke it back inside, Cam Taylor-Britt did a complete 360 spin move to go back the other direction. And so that, 360 spin moves are not effective in the NFL when you're trying to guard guys in defense one-on-one. So that gave Jakobi Meyers a free, wide-open lane, tons of separation, easy catch and run, pick up 23 yards on a first down. Bad technique from Cam Taylor-Britt, and they were talking on the broadcast about how he's given up over 400 yards of receiving so far this season. So he's making some good plays on the ball. He had that one spectacular interception against the Chiefs, but he's also giving up a lot of catches and a lot of yards. But otherwise, the Raiders weren't really able to do much offensively. And there was, right before halftime, Raiders had a questionable sequence of plays where it looked like they had an opportunity to score points, but I was confused. On the broadcast, Daryl Johnston was also confused by what they were doing. And when I went back and watched this, it was even more egregious. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but this is a fireable offense, I think. So if you go back and watch, the Raiders were moving the ball. They had about less than a minute to go in the half. At this point, I think it was, look at it, it was 17-10 Cincinnati going into halftime, and the Bengals were going to get the ball after halftime. So this is going to be the last possession that the Raiders had for a while, the last opportunity to keep the game close. And the Raiders, they had a decent play on first down. They were about at the 50-yard line, midfield, getting into Bengals territory. They had a miscommunication between the quarterback and Jakobi Meyers. Incomplete pass. 3rd and 4, no timeouts, and I think it was about 20 seconds left. Raiders decided to run a screen pass, which the Bengals, they figured out what it would be. Read it out, so the Raiders ended up throwing an incompletion anyway. But even if they completed the screen pass, unless they scored a touchdown, they wouldn't have had time to get on the field to do anything. It was a confusing play. But then even more than that, 17 seconds left, 4th and 4. It's inside Bengals territory, about the Bengals 45-yard line. They don't go for it. So the Raiders, they could have gone for it, picked up a first down to get inside field goal position, run the field goal team on, kick a field goal as time expires in the first half because they don't have any timeouts. But like I said, they're down by 7, and that the Bengals offense has been scoring points. So as the Raiders team, you got to give yourself a chance to at least stay in the game. For some reason, the Raiders decided to punt the ball away and didn't try to pick up a first down, didn't try to get inside field goal position to try to even score points. They just punted the ball away to the Bengals offense, and then the Bengals just took a knee and went to halftime. So the Raiders were perfectly content to go into halftime down by 7 points and not even try to score any points. Really weird sequence of plays for the Raiders. Daryl Johnston was confused about it. And then after the game, so then, the Raiders didn't do much on offense. They continued to have injuries on the offensive line, like I said. So then in the second half, they weren't able to stop Trey Hendrickson. This is where Trey Hendrickson kind of took over the game in the second half. He was going against the Raiders like third string left tackle. He wasn't able to stop Trey Hendrickson. So there was a lot of sacks. Raiders couldn't do anything. And after the game, the Raiders fired 3 of their offensive coaches. The Raiders fired their offensive coordinator, they fired their quarterback's coach, and they fired their offensive line coach. And the Raiders are 2-7 at this point. Their coach is in his first season as the full-time head coach. He's a defensive coach. Antonio Pierce was a defensive player. He's a defensive head coach, and they have one of the worst offenses in the league. So as the defensive coach, you got to say, okay, well, somebody's got to fall on the sword here, take the blame for this. It's not going to be me, for sure. So if we got to make any changes, we're going to make some changes on the offense. So basically, all the offensive coaches got fired, except for, the receivers coach and the running backs coach and the tight ends coach. You can't fire everybody, obviously. So basically, anybody who is making some of the decisions offensively, for whatever reason, it wasn't working out. I don't know what they're going to do to get somebody else in there. But so obviously, not a good offensive performance for the Raiders, as we could tell after the game by the fact that 3 of their coaches got fired right after the game. So sometimes you'll have games like that, where as the Bengals, sometimes the other team, all their players get hurt and their coaches get fired the next day. Sometimes it just works out like that for you in the NFL. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Like I say, a win is a win, so we'll take it. But immediately after the game ended, I was kind of feeling like Joe Burrow was, where Joe Burrow looked so mad. It was so funny where Joe Burrow had 5 touchdown passes and he looked mad. He looked pissed off, shaking his head, looked disgusted, like, oh, I can't believe I, didn't make all the plays that I could have made. He was such a perfectionist. He was stewing and brooding over the missed opportunities, because there were missed opportunities. There was, like I said, the missed deep pass to Chase where Chase just dropped it. There was another missed opportunity. The Bengals had 3rd and goal at about the 5-yard line. They tried to throw a fade pass to Jamar Chase in the left end zone, and Raiders cornerback number 0, Jacorian Bennett, did a good job of breaking the pass up, making it fall incomplete before Jamar Chase could catch it. I know Jamar Chase wanted to catch that one. Joe Burrow wanted that touchdown. They weren't able to convert that one. So probably Joe Burrow was thinking that was a missed opportunity there. There was another pass Joe Burrow threw to Andre Yosivas, number 80, up the right sidelines. And Andre, again, was not able to come down with the catch. He had it in his hands, but Jack Jones, number 18 for the Raiders, was able to break the pass up, make it fall incomplete. So this is another one similar to that play Andre had against the Cleveland Browns 2 weeks ago, where he had it in his hands, but he let the defender knock it out. So got to get those hands a little bit stronger so you can come down with those catches. That was another one I felt like Joe Burrow probably felt like he should have made. But for the most part, Joe Burrow was, like I said, playing his best game. And the other thing was that pick 6. I know Joe Burrow was really upset with himself for throwing that interception, because that was a point in the game where the Raiders were mostly out of it. They weren't going to come back unless they got a defensive score, because the offense obviously wasn't able to do anything. They only scored 10 points up until that point. But then that interception run back for a touchdown gave the Raiders life. They gave them a chance to come back, and that's what you don't want to do. You want to put the team away, like they say, step on their neck, whatever, anecdote or analogy you want to use. But really, when you want to make it a decisive victory, put the game out of reach. Interception is exactly what you don't want to do in that circumstance. So I know there's some things that they can correct, obviously, on the field and off the field this week for the Bengals. But it's better than losing. And did I mention that the Browns got completely blown away this week? So a huge Bengals win and a embarrassing loss for the Browns. It really doesn't get any better than that. So that pretty much does it. I don't think there's too much else to cover. If there are any, I probably forgot something, but I can cover that in the next episode. This episode's been going on long enough, but I wanted to come at you as quickly as I could on this Victory Monday so we can all celebrate this win together. And before you know it, the Baltimore Ravens game is going to be upon us Thursday night in Baltimore. So that's now that the Bengals got this win, now that they're 4-5, they're still in the hunt. That makes this game against Baltimore that much more exciting and interesting. If they had lost this game against the Raiders, gone to 3-6, lost to one of the worst teams in the NFL, we would have been thinking, oh boy, here we go. We're about to get blown away by the Ravens. But no, now we're thinking this is going to be a good game against the Ravens. So lots to get excited about heading into this game. Lots to get excited about coming from this Raiders victory. So it can't all be perfect. Like I said, hopefully they'll get Jermaine Burton, whatever his issues were this week, hopefully he'll get those things straightened out and he'll be able to contribute to this team going forward. Like I said, Zach Taylor said, we know Jermaine Burton's best days are ahead of him, which Jermaine Burton is a rookie and he's only played in a couple of games so far. So I would hope that his best days are ahead of him because he hasn't really done anything as of yet. There weren't really any better days so far. So it's nowhere to go but up from here for Jermaine Burton is what Zach Taylor should have said. It's like, there's really nowhere to go but up. So as long as this motherfucker shows up to work, maybe he'll be able to do something. But hopefully you show up for the next episode of this podcast. I appreciate you for listening. If you've listened all the way to the end, give me a thumbs up, give me a positive rating, subscribe, do all that stuff, share it around. I don't do this. It's not sponsored by anything. The only thing I'm really doing this for is for fun for you to listen to. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, I'm going to leave you with a hoo-day and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.